tell me. All right, cool. Well, hi everybody. We are here Facebook Live with my just good friend Jeremy Pleasant from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So welcome, man. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, man. It's good. Good to be here with you, Luke.
Yeah. Now, what time is it? I didn't even ask you what time it is there because it's obviously later than
Uh,
8:30.
yeah, it's 10:30.
10:30. Dang, man. Well, thanks for staying up
That's how
late,
much.
dude. Well, I'll take it. That goes deep to my heart, man. Deep to my heart. So, well, everybody, Jeremy's lead pastor at the Vineyard Church, Baton Rouge in Louisiana. And what I thought we could do for a few minutes, Jeremy and I have known for each other for years. And just, I thought we could touch base tonight. And Jeremy, just get to hear from you about what's going on in your local community with COVID-19. What's it been like for you just as a pastor, as your team is navigating through it? So maybe just to start off, what's kind of the vibe like in your local city, in your area? What are you sensing going on with the folks there?
Yeah. So there's a lot happening, and Louisiana is one of the places where we've had one of the bigger hotspots.
Okay.
In addition to California and New York, Louisiana has been hit pretty hard, and so it's affected kind of life all the way through from
Yeah.
obviously we're shelter in place like most everyone else have been for a while, but the road back is very unclear. You
Mm.
know the um, there's a lot of questions going on as to
Yeah.
when will come back, how will come back, kind of the long term effects.
I bet.
So I share with people, I love cheap gas, but how what in Louisiana, it's kind of like in Texas, um, uh, oil is kind of the backbone of the economy, and so
Oh, interesting.
when oil goes down, so do jobs, and
Wow.
so uh, that affects a lot of people as well. And then in our community, we have a lot of those in healthcare,
Okay.
some that are working in COVID-19 units.
Wow.
And so there's quite a bit of angst, quite a bit of uncertainty.
Yeah.
I think people are kind of getting to the point where it's starting to hit a wall.
I bet.
There's a lot of frustration, which is understandable. With in the middle of a quarantine,
Yeah.
and then and so we're kind of navigating a lot of that, and so I think there's a lot of people who I think everyone's affected,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
When you're forced to kind of have a drastic change in your life. But then
Yeah.
you have those who are going to be um, affected in unique ways.
Yeah.
Obviously those who have lost job or have hours cut, those who are all of a sudden homeschooling
Yeah.
and working
Yeah.
at the same those in healthcare who are working around the clock, and the families kind of surrounding them. And so there's all these layers that are affecting people, but everyone is also pushing in and pushing in hard, trying to say,
Right.
okay, what's the next thing.
Right.
uh, it's interesting because while you can't really say a pandemic is a natural disaster,
Hmm.
but there's a lot of commonalities between a pandemic and a natural disaster, and
Okay.
and that's something we're quite used to in Louisiana. Uh, from
Yeah.
from the famous Katrina to Gustav to the Great Flood of 2016, and so we've had major events affect
Wow.
our state and our community.
Yeah.
This one's different, right? This one is massively different, and so I think everyone is trying to navigate how to um, how to get through this, how to survive this, and so we as a church are looking at first, our community. How do we support our community through this?
Yeah.
Obviously, not being able to gather is a major thing, and so we started out initially saying, okay, well let's figure out online church and let's get online,
Mm.
and so we did that.
Yeah.
But they were like, okay, who are kind of how do we support those in our community that need the most support,
Yeah.
right? And so working internally, but then one of the things we're looking at now is like, okay, so what does response look like?
Oh,
The
okay.
vineyard is kind of it's our DNA, and the vineyard is we respond,
Right.
right, and reach and disaster, and so and that's probably one of the more difficult questions
Yeah.
because
I bet.
unlike a disaster, unlike some ongoing ministry, uh, we actually don't know how to answer that question, and I
Right.
don't know that anyone does yet. And so right now, it's really connecting with people and other partners we have in the city. There's some awesome nonprofits and other churches doing amazing things in the city.
Hmm.
And so just really starting to connect with them and city leaders and say, hey, what does our response look like?
Right.
How do we move forward in this? Because, the reality is, and this is one of the common areas, whether it's a natural disaster or this, besides supporting our immediate community, when we look at greater Baton Rouge,
Right.
um, those who are going to be affected the most are the ones who are the existing marginalized, right? Those who are already dealing with disadvantages
Right.
and other scenarios where you throw this in there and it widens the gap. And so we're
Yeah.
like, okay, so what does support, what does service, what do all these things look like
Right.
in response after this? And so we're looking at things strategically within the church and supporting our community, but also thinking about the greater Baton Rouge community
Right.
and how we respond there.
So even Jeremy, let me ask for whoever's going to see this, whether it's right now or later on Facebook, like even as people are praying for your local church, what's just the demographic and Baton Rouge like just as a city? Like you mentioned, obviously, this just exacerbates for those that maybe are already the marginalized, already on the fringes. So what's just the
Mhm.
city makeup like where you guys are planted?
So, if we're talking like ethnically, right now the city is going to be um, majority split of black and white,
Okay.
with 1 to 3% Asian population and a growing Latinx population,
Okay.
um, mostly Central American, and so kind of black and white has been the makeup for many years, right?
Yeah.
From the time, and so now we kind of have some growing populations, like I said, of Asian and Latinx, as well as families that have a population from kind of Middle Eastern families as well, and so and some more global populations that are growing as Baton Rouge is starting to become a more of a metropolis.
Okay.
We're starting to see more of that, but right now the majority of Baton Rouge
Right.
is going to be black and white, like 40-40,
Okay.
or 45, and one of the heartbreaking things about our city is that it is divided.
Mm.
We have um, the predominant black side of town and predominant white side of town,
Okay.
and so, what happens is it can be that plays out not just in where people are located, but
Mm.
it plays out in all levels of quality of life,
Okay.
um, and infrastructure. And there, like I said, there's a lot of people and organizations, and including our church, that are working towards, um, what restoration and reconciliation looks like.
Right.
Um, but that is kind of the current side of things. And so, up until I think maybe it was a year ago, um, Louisiana had the highest incarceration rate in the United States.
Wow.
And there's very little reentry programs. And
Okay.
so, get right now, due to COVID, a lot of prisoners are being released. Um,
Okay.
and so where there were few opportunities, if any, before, there's even less now. And
Wow.
so what does
Okay.
it to help people, uh, actually have a successful reentry, right? And
Right.
and, and so you kind of have you kind of have those things. We can talk about schools and education, right? And
Mm.
um, obviously everyone, and across the board, it's a struggle because
Yeah.
kids have been out of school for 4 to 6 weeks,
Right.
and and so the likely scenario is that everyone is going to be promoted, right? And so everyone's just going to be a little bit behind.
Right.
But those in the more rural areas, the areas with fewer resources,
Mm.
kind of the less affluent areas are going to be even more behind. And
Mm. Okay.
so, what does our response look like there? And so you kind of
Right.
have all these layers, right?
I
And
bet.
and we can't. can't work. No one can work in every area, right?
Right.
But as I think as we're praying and as we're asking, okay, what is it that God is doing and what is our response here? These are things to be praying about, to be seeking God on, and to be really
Yeah.
pursuing. If we're saying, hey, we're going to respond as people of the kingdom to to partner with God in this,
Right.
it's definitely you know we're definitely seeking to to figure out what church looks like in the future, but we're also seeking to
Right.
figure out how the church responds to the greater community
Yeah.
as a kingdom oriented,
Right.
which this is right in the middle of ministries. I don't have to I don't have to like unpack that at all, but like as a kingdom oriented church and movement of people, like we also do want to be leading
Right.
out.
So, Jeremy, let me ask you just on a personal level. For as now this has been weeks. Obviously, going through this is not only a country but the world's going through it. What's it been like just for you on a personal level as a leader, but then also with your team as your team is having to navigate and pray through and, like you said, ask all these questions. Some of them that don't even have answers yet. So, what's it been like for you on a personal level, and then what's it been like for your team as you've navigated this together?
Yeah. So I'll start with the team. I think it's definitely been a challenge, right?
Yeah.
It's hit everyone. I've had people on my team that have who aren't full timers, who are part timers, who have lost work and are affected by that. I have people on my team who are are full timers and parents and are trying to figure out
Yeah.
school. And so I mean you're talking about a massive change um, in the everyday life,
Right.
which when that happens, it obviously takes a toll, a huge
Right.
toll on anyone. And so our team hasn't been an exception to that.
Yeah.
And then we've also just been affected by okay, how do we quickly shift
Yeah.
to making sure that we are serving our people in our church the best way virtually.
Mm.
And now, thankfully, we have the resources being in the U.S., to do that,
Right.
right? I would say the majority of our population in our church has the capacity to access the internet. Not everyone, but most,
Right.
and so that helps. And so then we're just trying to figure out, okay, how do we connect with those who don't have access to the internet? And so
Yeah.
but it's still been a major overhaul. And so those first 2 weeks was just insanity
I bet.
of just trying to make this big shift and then settle in. And so and then it's hard because we don't know when we'll be gathering again,
Right.
and so that makes it difficult to plan, right? And so you're like,
Yeah.
okay, we had a meeting today. It's like, okay, so what are we doing in 2 weeks? What are we doing in a month? What are we doing in 6 weeks?
Yeah. I can't even
Uh,
imagine not even knowing an end table to plan for. Like that just sounds
right.
insane to me.
Yeah. And so it's tough. And so I think we have to do we do our best. And I think it's one of those things where we have to have a long term outlook
Yeah.
and plan structurally as best we can. Right. So
Yeah.
organizationally, and we're going to do our best to plan and shift. But as far as rollout and kind of this tomorrow and the
Right.
next week, we just got to take that day by day. We have to be
Yeah.
flexible. We have to really be uh, conscious on what everyone's doing
I
and
bet.
really be following the spirit and just saying, okay,
Yeah.
what's next. And so I think it's a little bit, for lack of a better phrase, both and.
Yeah. No,
um,
it fits, man. It
and
fits.
so personally, it's obviously it's been um, a definitely a whirlwind.
Yeah.
Time is just um, can't even calculate right now.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
It's
Yeah.
funny. I was talking with someone, and it felt like I talked to them 4 months ago. It was actually a month ago. I talked to them.
I bet, dude.
Hey,
Yeah.
we haven't had a meeting in a while. We got to touch base. And like, what are you talking about? And so it's like
I bet,
that's
dude.
how everything is just being compressed.
Yeah.
Um, Now, thankfully, my wife and I are still working, and so
Mm.
very grateful and
Yeah.
very fortunate for that. And And so on that end, you know, we recognize that that's not everyone's story,
Right.
and so we're grateful for that.
Yeah.
Kim works in education and works with districts and superintendents, so she's been working a lot more.
Mm.
And this time, I've been working a lot more as I was trying to handle many things, and so I think that the toll has been for me and us a little has been there,
Yeah.
but overall we're doing well. We don't have kids yet, so we're not.
Yeah.
I think dealing with that with the difficulties that come there, in the
Yeah.
middle of
Yeah.
this, um, and so yeah, we're doing well, but also just being stretched and
Yeah.
challenged
I'm sure,
as
man.
anyone. And then as, personally, as I think about our work at Baton Rouge, I have to think about our work internationally as well,
Mm.
and how just as much as we are affected, um, it's exponential for our friends and partners across the globe, and
Yeah.
so um, meeting with our teams around that a lot, and not that there's much we can do right now, but just try
Right.
to figure out what we can do
Right.
um, from the U.S. Towards the work we do internationally, because um, you know most churches and many people in the U.S. have the capacity to recover.
Yeah.
Um, that's not always going to be the case. That's in the majority of the world.
Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah. I was talking to some of our friends in Indonesia with the partnerships there, and it's just hearing their stories is, like you said, every place is walking this out different. And obviously experiences are different in every place. So, Jeremy, let me ask you this just to kind of round out our time tonight. In the midst of
Wow.
everything that's going on, I know it goes by fast, huh? But
Well,
we're gonna
usually
do
when you and I talk, we're like
we're
three
gonna do
hours.
podcasts together, so we're gonna have a lot of time. But it's also super late for you because you're in Louisiana, so I want to be sensitive to that. But let me ask you this: in the midst of everything going on, and obviously I work around people every day that don't know Jesus, and so I just hear fear exacerbated on just a large level, right? Which is pretty normal across the board. Even in the midst of everything, knowing how God works in the midst of chaos, He always has, right? He
Yeah.
has always been faithful, even if our world in our minds is going berserk. He's consistent and steady, and He's faithful to what He's going to do. What do you see in the Lord do in the midst of even in the midst of all the crazy? What are just one or two things you sense the Holy Spirit doing that we can kind of celebrate and think, wow, gosh, yeah, but God's doing this in the midst of it? What are you seeing on that level?
Yeah. So there's uh, there's a couple things. I think one, I think I'm still waiting and observing,
Mm,
right, and just like really listening,
yeah,
um, because I believe He's doing something. Now, I think it's really important to take things in context, right? And
mm,
so, I wrote a letter to the congregation right when we had when we stopped gathering in person, and this is like, this is not the first time we've
mm,
endured this as a global community and as a faith community
right,
throughout, throughout our history, and every time people have responded, it's like, oh, this God that these people talk about is real.
mm,
And what I see God doing in the midst of this, what I see the Holy Spirit doing is opening up a, um, opening up the door for people to see the real, genuine, loving God who
mm.
cares.
Wow, yeah,
And there's a lot of barriers to that.
mm,
It's interesting because we're right in the middle of a series called "What's God Really Like," and just
mm,
talking about the nature and character of God,
yeah,
which often the narratives we have from many different places that
yeah,
many others have, especially those who don't believe in God, and so what I see God doing is is just opening up a window,
mm,
and that I think we need to be ready for.
yeah,
There's the genuine, unimaginable love of Christ. And
mm,
like first or anything else.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be powerful. I think there's going to be opportunities for it, despite some of the unfortunate things that we have seen happen.
Yeah.
That through all the noise, we're going to have an opportunity just to share the genuine love of God.
Yeah.
And
That's awesome.
that's our first call. And this is the second thing is this is one of the few times, especially in the West, where our, for lack of a better term, fate was tied to someone else's outside of the West. All of a sudden, it wasn't just what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Oh, everyone's dealing with this. It all of a sudden opens our eyes, and I think that's critical when we're talking about a kingdom that's coming. When we're talking about um, engaging with all people.
Yeah.
Being able to say, "Oh, they're dealing with this over here, just like I am." I think it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And my hope is that would be a catalyst for not being so insular, not being so concerned with just what's happening in our neck of the woods, but actually caring for everyone that God also cares for.
Yeah.
So that's what I see. That's my hope. That's my prayer.
Yeah.
I'm sometimes accused of being too optimistic, but that's what I'm looking forward to.
I love it, man. Well, Jeremy, thanks, dude. It was just gold to hear some of what's going on. You know, I would love, you know, whoever's watching now or whoever's going to see this just on Facebook, just to be able to be praying for you and your community. Hear a little bit about Baton Rouge, which I was stoked about. So yeah, man, thanks for staying up this late, dude. You know, this works for me because our girls just went down, but you're like getting into super late hours, dude. So
I'm a night owl, so this works.
So it works, man. Well, we have blessings, man. Thank you. And for everybody listening, whoever's going to watch this, Jeremy's going to be on the Radical Middle podcast for going into the future because him and I have a lot to talk about. So you'll get to see his pretty face a lot more, which I'm looking forward to. So anyway, man, well, bless you, bro. And thanks for sharing and spending the time with us tonight, man.
All right, man. Hey, give the girls my best.
I will, man. Get some good sleep if you can.
Yes,
all right, man.
Indeed.
Okay. Thanks, Jeremy. Peace, bro.